All right, I want to show you guys something that has just occurred to me, and I need to show it to you before. Just if I don't do it now, there'll just be too much that'll come up that I'll realize, and I won't be able to get to this because I'll be trying to show you something else. I need to take this one step at a time. I think this is important. It's going to make connections for what we're talking about with the monatomic gold, and it's going to be a unique way to understand how Dan is connected to the bee. Not only the bee, but the honey. You know, we've looked at Dan from one avenue of sight to where Dan is symbolized with the serpent, Genesis 49, even described as an adder, which will be a poisonous serpent out of Jacob's own mouth. We see in Genesis also earlier it's quoted that the serpent shall be cursed to eat the dust of the earth all the days of his life. We have now since learned that the manna is that dust in question. Okay, even a fuller meaning would include the carbon dust itself, and then that would symbolize man. So the serpent's eating men, devouring, learning to hunt, just like in Ezekiel 19 symbolized with the lions. So the reality of the serpent being cursed to eat the dust fulfills with what Dan, now knowing the dust is monatomic gold. It's gold. And then this could be connected, of course, to the color of honey. And then it would connect us to the bee, rightfully. But that's just one avenue of sight. We can look at this from any avenue. And if we're looking at the truth will be consistent. And then it will interconnect, interflow with the new avenue of sight and all the variables that lay upon that. And it should be consistent as well. And we're going to do that. So now we're going to see from an entirely new avenue why this is the fractal, from micro to macro. Any branch of the snowflake is the same reflection of the original geometry. The same thing we're going to see with the truth. It's always consistent. That's why there is nobody that can bring any of this down. The only thing they can do is try to dilute it, follow after it, try to shadow it up when they reinterpret it. So looking at it from a new avenue of sight here, it's going to be real simple, okay? And it's going to fit so perfect, it's just incredible. In the Old Testament, Exodus chapter 25, verses 29 through 31, relates that the shewbread was made at Mount Horeb by Bezaleel, the son of Uri ben-Hur. He was said to have been filled with wisdom. Remember, we've been talking about this. Mount Horeb is Mount Sinai. All of this is related to the story of the manna, okay, and the Israelites in the encampment supposed to collect this by the word of God, supposedly. They're supposed to eat this manna that is collected with the dew, the morning dew, the dew of heaven around the camp. And then we know now that that has been blowing with the winds out of the Temple Hathor, the refinery that's on top of Mount Horeb, aka Sinai. Sinai and Horeb, the wilderness mount, the exact same place. Now, you have to realize that this is also a wilderness. So if anybody was to seek to try to contest this, even at this point, you got to realize what in the world would anyone be doing out there? And then obviously they would be doing it at the place where Moses was repeating the practice with the golden calf. Right there at the very mount where the tools, the refining tools, were in place to even carve and engrave the tablets in stone. And then, of course, we find the substance being quoted by various people of the tribes of Israel tasting like honey. And then they give the exact same description for the substance, which is monatomic gold. There's no question any longer. The thing that I'm trying to at least get through to your head right now before we look at the name Bezaleel, bees, making this shewbread, which is the monatomic gold, and then Dan eats this dust because he's one of these ancient mighty descendants. Dan is an anagram for DNA, okay, which is all about this planet of crossing, which is the double crossing, okay, the double crossing in a deceptive way of this planet. That's always a negative term if you talk about you've been double crossed. And then we understand that with the XX chromosomes of women and then the 2/3 genetics offered to the offspring. So there's our Bezaleel. We'll look into that a little further here. But my point that I really want you to absorb here, let me look at the time, is why, through the traditional interpretation that has been almost imposed upon us and still seeking to be imposed upon us by certain YouTubers, really a whole community of YouTubers, it's just unreal, that are completely blind to this, ignorant, and in most cases they're not, they just want you to be. And you do not realize that you can't just put simply 2 and 2 together to where the Bible records that there is a refinery for artisans and craftsmen in Mount Horeb, the Sinai wilderness, and then Moses, and he's making the shewbread, the same description of the manna, and then Moses is going up to the top of this refinery and then coming down and showing his skills at making it as well. That is absolutely stunningly incredible that nobody has put that together thus far. I mean, really, even myself. I mean, as much as I've talked about it over the last year and a half, 2 years, I haven't just seen the plain relativity of that. It's just, I mean, it's so in your face. It's just unreal how powerful that is as a teaching tool to teach this truth to people, to get them to understand that we're talking real talk. Real talk. Real, tangible truth that opens up new avenues of sight that will connect to new variables of consistent truths. And it does not stop. And I'll tell you, once you begin gaining that momentum and that velocity, you yourself will begin to see so much more, and the constraints and the limits will drop. But when you try to translate that back to those who are still limited and constrained, it's pretty difficult. It really is. It's a challenge. So let me go ahead and just let you read a couple more things here. He was supposedly filled with wisdom and understanding and knowledge. We also learn Bezaleel was a skilled goldsmith and a craftsman in all manner of cunning works, who was placed in charge of building the Ark of the Covenant. Now remember, I told you the Ark of the Covenant also was connected as a machine. It was an electrical capacitator. It was also a storage house for the shewbread. It was also a thing that could process the shewbread and create it. It actually levitated, because you should most likely, if you've done any research on monatomic gold, you understand that it has the uncanny ability to cause things that come in contact with it to levitate. So this Bezaleel, I want you to see, at least connected from the other video, is connected in making candlestick of all pure gold. Once again, the symbolism and fulfillment of craftsmen who are refining this monatomic powder in an effort to create a candlestick of gold. Now the candlestick of gold will connect to Luke chapter 33, which will then connect back to Zechariah chapter 4. And then of course 5, reading through to understand. Alright, so let me just give you a little bit more information here to understand this B parallel. You see it in the name with Bezaleel, but I'm going to show you a stronger connection there. The sweet-tasting white substance which appeared around the mountain in the mornings, in which Moses referred to as bread, was therefore called manna. What is this? By virtue of its unknown origin. It wasn't unknown, it was just unknown to Israel, who was being brought into this wilderness. Remember, Moses was an Egyptian. He was trying to expose and adhere unto Israel. And then, of course, Israel also sees itself through its Egyptian heritage now, through Ephraim and Manasseh. Israel now sees itself as being connected to this descendancy of the daughters of men that had fallen to the sons of God in Genesis 6. With the fallen sons of God in Genesis 6. And then this is why you get Yahweh in representation seek to understand is that they themselves, by the doctrine, are the golden calves, not the idol. And he gets furious and, he murders about 3,000 of them. Which is not funny, but it's ironic, I guess. That's where the humor is that people are so easily swayed and controlled by that. And they want you to believe that it's Christianity and what Jesus says is controlling and hurting the world. Bull. That's bull. Has nothing to do with any of that. Jesus Christ is not creating religions. Jesus Christ is not building temples with the hands of man. Jesus Christ is all about progressive truth and the freedom to experience it. That's a fact. So it says, the same question also appears in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Now, we read this the other night. The oldest complete book in the world, alternatively known as the Papyrus of Eni, a royal scribe. This 18th dynasty scroll from Thebes, acquired by the British Museum in 1888, is extensively illustrated and around 76 feet over 23 meters. 1888. It's another date I know with that. And then definitely, of course, some 8s are interesting. In this ancient ritualistic work, the bread of the presence is called Shefa food, and the pharaoh seeking the terminal enlightenment of the afterlife asks, at every stage of his journey, the repetitive question, what is it? Okay, so you can see here that it's even described, and the verses are in the Bible, it's described as sweet tasting like honey. It is the exact reflection. So now you get the taste that it's tasting like honey. All right? And now you get this connection with this goldsmith named Bezaleel, right? And then you start getting into these Danites. And then Samson is one of the most famous Danites, so I told you, is really cover for Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh and Samson are the same character. Everything you see here with Samson is really a compilation of previous works of another ancient mighty hero named Gilgamesh, who is also famous for rendering lions with his bare hands exactly as Samson. Samson is famous for destroying lions. And you're going to see he's famous for it in such a way where it's symbolized with the bees. And after a time he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. Now remember, on our Iraqi dinar, they're trying to show us that the lion is being beheaded. And you all have seen that probably enough. I'm going to look for it if I can find it quick enough. Show it. Which means they want to destroy the lion. Now remember, they all of the sons of God carry the symbol as lions. When the ones rebelled that were wicked, they became evil lions. This is where you get the history from that in Ezekiel chapter 19. Now the lions have been taught to kill, and that was by their mother. This is a symbolization of Ishtar, which then morphs within the mother of Israel, showing their assemblage from the daughters of men with the sons of God in Genesis 6. So there's our lion that they seek on destroying. It's the same thing in Samson's riddle that he's talking about. A little further up, I probably should have showed you, you should know by now that Samson is a Danite. Then went Samson down, and his father and his mother, to Timnath, and came to the vineyards of Timnath. And behold, a young lion roared against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him as he would have rent a kid. And he had nothing in his hand, but he told not his father or his mother what he had done. Now Gilgamesh is famous. Gilgamesh and Samson, no question, same character. Okay? Now, what you see here is a young lion is roaring against him. What type of young lion is this being depicted? This is being depicted as an unfallen sons of God. It's not necessarily being translated, or the traditional view is not that. And then, of course, they don't even let you know that it's even symbolism for a son of God at all. You just probably thinking this is a lion until you understand what they are starting to talk about here with what they expect once this has been destroyed. Now, you got to realize this young lion that's roaring against him are the unfallen sons of God that are speaking out against these sons of God. The unfallen sons of God are non-combatant. They're not militant. They're not warlike. They're not practicing genocide, and they are not seeking to kill and overthrow the fallen sons of God like you have been taught Israel was by Yahweh to conduct genocide on giant remnants across the lands that they were hoping to basically steal and conquer using murder. And then you've been all taught that it's because of this genetics, when in all reality, you just saw Jesus in a few videos back of mine say, no, all flesh is his. All flesh is his, and he forgives it all, and he's not seeking on destroying and smiting anything but the rule of Ishtar on this world, and then, of course, the sons of perdition. And the sons of perdition are Lucifer, Satan, and the devil. They are spirit sons. They are spirit sons. So you can see totally here if you have the understanding and then you go beyond the traditional interpretation and you see the history that's here and you understand what's going on. All right, they have fused ancient stories with a little bit of creative writing here with a riddle that you're going to see. So this is really the character Gilgamesh, which is an ancient hero king. And then in that story, he goes to the cedars of Lebanon and tries to make it up to heaven. Where's he trying to go? He's trying to go to the moon. Where is he leaving from? Baalbek. It was a place where rockets were literally taking off to get to the moon in ancient times. And I got the biblical proof. I haven't shown it yet because I haven't been able to get to the point to where I even talk about Baalbek yet and its connection to the Temple Solomon. It's just unreal. You wouldn't believe it. So that's my point, to talk to you a little bit more about Gilgamesh one day, or I'll make it a point to do that. So now you see that he has rendered this lion with his bare hands, and then after he has sexual relationship with a woman from the Philistines, which is supposed to be really, remember, the Philistines are supposed to be all super bad, but for whatever reason, every bit of trouble Samson's ever been in is because he has made the first move in taking one of these women that he's not supposed to. He's bringing this upon himself. And then, of course, they take retribution on him. But you got to realize who the Philistines are in this instance. And they're not anything what you're being taught they are. Nothing. And it's unreal. It is absolutely unreal. And, of course, Samson's not, as you are now beginning to see. So you see what my point is Samson being a Danite. He is called the 13th judge of Israel. This is what is going to connect him perfectly with Ephraim, the 13th tribe. And neither of them are found in Revelation, where the 144,000 are described, that remnant being taken to the moon. And there's a specific reason. One is because the remnant Ephraim is already there. And at that point, Dan is still sealed. Dan is under the earth. But as you know, Jesus Christ described, Dan is actually coming to the moon unwelcomed. And he's going to spoil their riches. Incredible. Because Dan's going to be legion. Oh boy. The 13th judge. Who would he be judging? Number 13. Oh boy. There's going to be a division up there. These people have no idea. It ain't going to be the party. Life ain't some big party just because you got a lot of money and people are practically worshiping you. I'm telling you, it ain't like that. So here comes Samson's riddle. And he says, verse 12, chapter 14, and Samson said unto them, I will now put forth a riddle unto you. If ye can certainly declare it me within 7 days of the feast, and find it out, then I will give you 30 sheets and 30 change of garments. 30 and 30. Pretty interesting. 3 and 3. But if ye cannot declare it me, then shall ye give me 30 sheets and 30 change of garments. And they said unto him, Put forth thy riddle, that we may hear it. And he said unto them, Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. And of course, they couldn't figure it out. All right? Many of you should know how this goes. Okay, so out of the eater came forth meat. Now that's definitely on this channel so far been interpreted with the symbol of the Ouroboros, which is the serpent eating his own tail. He becomes the eater, and then the meat that he offers is the doctrine of vanity of himself. All right? But there's more to it. I don't know if I want to kind of get into this at this point, because if I say it, I want to explain and give the support. So I'm going to hold back a little bit. And then we've got, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. Now, you know the strong is connected to iron, which is then connected to the ancient mighty men that will now connect us to the description of Samson, which then connects us back to the Nephilim, which then will connect us back to the symbolism here for the serpents eating the dust of the earth all the days of their life. The serpent seed is the Nephilim. You can see where all that comes together. And so out of the strong came forth sweetness. This is where I've always interpreted that Israel believes that once the locusts arrive, okay, because they're the strong, they're the ancient mighty ones, they're the Danites. Once the locusts arrive, and remember, the locusts can only arrive if they're the onagers. The locusts can only arrive when there is a total desolation of the cities. So that's what the roll is, the flying roll. That's of Zechariah 4 or Zechariah 5. And then that's what the second cup is, Revelation 18, verse 21 and 22, Revelation 13, verse 13, Revelation 17, verse 17, the fire from the sky. So there's got to be this destruction. All right? So, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. The sweetness should be the golden age that is ushered in, but it also should be Israel's expectancy of all this high knowledge, right? Now, this begins to be the temptation of the original temptation in the Garden of Eden that was presented almost in a sweetness-like manner, a tempting manner, all right? Because all of this, if it's still in reflection of these mighty ones that are in the dust of the earth, they're like the bees, they're tempting this with this honey. All right, it all just completely makes total sense. So this ancient Danite, Samson, is making this riddle, when in all actuality, he's not. And in all actuality, Gilgamesh is not. This is creative writing that the people or the scribes have taken liberties that have worked for certain kings and worked this out to make this message, all with a complete 3 and 3, back with the 33, back with the gold candlestick, back with what Jesus was talking about in Luke 11:33. Okay? Now I know 30 and 30 is 60, but that just simply becomes a news number. But if you get rid of the 2 zeros in the placement, you got 3 and 3 again. And it's no accident. Obviously, you know that they are completely against the truth of Jesus Christ. Jesus has been symbolized as a lion, but he's not symbolized as no weak lion. He's symbolized as a conquering lion, and he's going to conquer this with truth, not with force. And that's why you see no railing accusation has been brought against them, and this is just going to be worked out as it was declared at the end of the consummation of their crimes. That's when action's going to be taken, and we're pretty close to that point right now. So I'm sorry for the little bit of my jumbling up. Just a little bit of proof here, what I tell you about these sons of God, mighty ones, also being seen as bulls, and then they called our women cows. Listen to what Samson says about his woman. And he said unto them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, ye had not found out my riddle. The heifer is his woman. He's calling his woman a cow. Just as I said, these ancient mighty ones saw our women as the birthing vehicles, the cows. This is where we get mama, moo, moo, ma, ma. Same thing. All right. Now, back to the more interesting conclusion of this if I've done a well enough presentation of this. Because believe you me, I know that if you've not seen many videos and you have not studied biblical things, you're not familiar with who Dan is and all the other stuff around all this, you would not probably get none of this. And that's one thing that they got working for them. But in the end, we're working for him. And that's going to see us through. Bezaleel. Now, obviously, you should understand my connection here. That a person, literally with the first phonetics of bees in his name, bees, okay, is responsible for making the shefa bread, the monatomic gold. Now, it gets better. Listen, personal name meaning in the shadow of God. Now, that reminds me, I've got one more thing to show you. This is going to explain that perfectly. Give me a second. Personal name meaning in the shadow of God. The son of Uri, a member of the tribe of Judah. Now, you remember, we were looking at this in perspective for the plain of Sharon, describing and what exactly was its advantage when ingested by the ancient kings of the house of gold in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and later Judea. All right, then we come up to Solomon's time, the whole nine. All right. We see that this Bezaleel is of the tribe of Judah and a great grandson of Caleb. He and another man, the Danite Aholiab, were skilled craftsmen who were responsible for making the tabernacle and its furnishings and its trappings. His skill derived from his being filled with the Spirit of God. Most modern translations of the Bible render the names of these men Bezaleel and Aholiab. Number 2, man who followed Ezra's leadership and divorced his foreign wife. Very, very interesting. The Bezaleel in question from which we read was the cunning, skilled craftsman is actually working with a Danite who is another skilled craftsman in making this shefa bread gold that tastes like honey. Incredible. Incredible. I mean, and to tell you something here, guys, about these tribes. First of all, there never was 12 tribes. Never. And if you find that hard to believe, well, let me tell you now that the Bible attests to 14. You probably never knew that there was 14 tribes if you're like most people. So that would probably give you a pretty good chance to realize that if that could be true, in which in reality the fullness of it, it's not. That's just the biblical arrangement that has been arranged and given through history. But in reality, there has been a very few amount of tribes, not even over the amount of 6. All right, in true form, actual history. But at least what I'm trying to get you to understand is that the Bible includes 14 tribes. But maybe I'll just save this for a whole nother video because it just gets into too much stuff here. It does. If I tell you all this, then I want to keep going and supporting it, and we lose focus on what I was supposed to show you with this. Okay. Let me just do that here. Let me just maybe talk just briefly, though, a little bit what I was kind of going to say. Dan is really being the origins of really what Dan is really being covered up and then added into it like it's one of the tribes so that it can give the story right along the supposed Hebrew theology, which it's not original Hebrew theology, all right? So it's being added in their more ancient stories. If you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is supposedly one of the oldest literary works on the face of the earth. Pretty incredible. It's real old, and they're unable to really truly accurately date it. But man, there's so much stuff to talk about. I'm trying to see the time. All right, now I guess the time was just out. What I was going to show you here is let me show you a very interesting fractal connection. Personal name meaning in the shadow of God. How is that going to connect up to this picture right here? All right, because that's their God. And then I'm telling you that that's the same thing that you're seeing reflected back here. The same thing with the gold, the same temptation, same connection with the serpents, eating the dust. You see that Israelites, okay, of the tribes of Israel are making this substance. And they're eating it just like the Egyptian and the Babylonian kings before them. And it's in the Bible. All right? So you see that there's a consistency with what God they're all worshiping, and it's not Jesus Christ. And it's the main reason why Israel had no problem rejecting Jesus when he appeared and began to reveal the truth of the Paradise Father. And they were not jiving with it because they had already been in the shadow of another. So if this name literally means in the shadow of God, you can see it. Look what's happening here. This God is actually in front of the light, blocking it. All right? He's obviously not the sun. He's in front of the light of the sun, and he is obscuring it. He is blocking the light and creating a glare. This glare is now really creating the obstruction of light. All right? Or this glare is the telltale sign of the obstruction of light. In all actuality, what you are in is if you are in front of this God looking at him, you're in his shadow. If you're seeing this God as your God and your truth, right now you're in his shadow. And then that shadow line is projecting this way. There is no light getting to you right here. And that's exactly what this name means. Personal name meaning in the shadow of God. Now, yes, I know that in the Bible there are scriptures that allude to a loving Father and people being within his shadow. Absolutely true. Because the shadow is a refuge from the heat. But that's in the truth of the matter, not in the deception. When we're dealing with this dark prince, that's not the shadow that you want to be in just because it says shadows are great for refuge from heat. Still does not make it right to be in the shadow of the very one bringing the heat. I don't think that's a refuge any longer, is it? So you're supposed to be able to make easy moral judgments about what's true and right. And anybody that's unable to at this point can consider themselves indoctrinated big time. And if you need a doctor, you're sick. So there you have it. Why Dan from another avenue is connected to the bees. Literally, Dan is working with the bees, making the manna, making the dust. All right? And then if now you can see that Dan and Gilgamesh are the same, you can see how far Dan goes back way before Israel, way before Abraham. You getting what I'm saying? And you can see how Dan no longer fulfills the traditional view of being a part of the 12 tribes. And then you can begin to understand some of the inconsistencies between chapters 13, 14, and 15 of the book of Judges with other scriptures that don't record the exact same sequence of events that you see 13, 14, and 15. All right, and then of course, Dana's recorded in chapter 15, I think, going into a hollow earth. And he slays these Philistines with the jawbone of an ass. And I told you the ass that Dana's representing is called an onager, and this is where we get the word ogre from. And then if you remember, what's his name, Shrek, that cartoon ogre who has a donkey for a friend, a wild ass, an onager. O-N-A-G-R. That's where we get the root for ogre from. So Dan is considered an onager, which is a wild ass. We're going to connect all this up with Artemis, believe it or not, in the monatomic gold video. You ain't going to believe all this. So there it is. Don't be in the shadow of this God, because I thought all you guys were supposed to be standing in the light. But, obviously they think they want their third eye open, and in reality, this is not the way to do it. And I can witness to that. I'll be back.